Buenos dias. So today this morning rather, I will be practicing the habits of action intro material. So I'll give you a second or two to get in. This is a really challenging topic for me to talk to right now, being transparent, because I recently was gifted with a very strong awareness that there is nothing that is not you. You know what I mean? And so the idea of doing something to get something is limited and actually denial of your divinity. And it sounds bizarre in a 3D world where things do appear to be outside of you. However, I find that I tend to attract people who, I call them strong points of consciousness, but there's got to be another way to explain that. And basically what I mean when I say that is it's like you have access to a lot of energy or source. It's like that. And I think this is a function of how much pain you felt, or I'm not sure. It's like there's like a depth and a draw on isness that's like appears to be greater than average, in that what's true for most is not necessarily true for you. And I think I find that to be particularly true when somebody's trying to do something and they're coming at it from a self-critical point. So they're saying like, I should be different than I am. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm this, but I should be that. And that sort of like amplifies their experience of that gap. Whereas if they stepped into acceptance, it's almost like a secret door opens, and then whatever they'd been stuck behind can move. So if you're joining, what I'm doing today, or this morning rather, is just practicing the habits of action discussion I'll be doing later for the patreon.com/habitbook weekly content. I just went on like a needless rant about how this is kind of a challenging topic for me right now. So let's do some categories. So what if we'll do an inner habit and an outer habit. I find that people too I attract have super amazing awareness internally. So we've kind of got like this interface with the world. So everything outside, everything inside. And if you have turned your awareness inward, you might be able to notice your reactions in a way that you feel like you can kind of orchestrate or retool them. And then you might even have a layer of awareness back there that kind of informs how you want to adjust your reactions. You might even have another layer of awareness of that. And so it just kind of gets like deeper and deeper and deeper. And what's trippy as fuck is that it seems like they're hierarchical, and they sort of are, but actually everything on both sides of the line is equal. You seem to be like the point that's watching or wearing those things, but we can identify, or we do identify with different slices of awareness in a way that makes it seem real, or that it's happening separate from us. So what's really beautiful is that the same strategy that kind of collapses the tension works in each slice. So tension would be like, and I don't know what it's like for other people, but for me, it could be really intense of thinking like, it's like, I'm aware of Shaylee, and Shaylee should or could act like this to generate this result. And so I'm very aware of like trying to drive myself to be other than I am. Where did I get that fucking idea? Why can't I just be as I am, you know? And so so that's an example of an internal experience that I'd be trying to shift, but externally we could be doing that too. Why is this person behaving this way? Why do I have this job, this thing? And so we've got this thing, and then we've got space around the thing, which is sort of like our understanding of it. And if our understanding is such that it makes the thing it's pointing at seem wrong, we're suffering needlessly. But where do we have the idea that this shouldn't be the way that it is? It's very trippy, but the idea in all of those layers is if you can kind of like do this, maybe this is perfect, maybe I'm supposed to be here, maybe this is the way things are supposed to be, then it kind of collapses the tension in a way that you relax enough to take in new information that would allow you to move beyond where you are. So if you're just joining today, I'm talking about the habits of action content that I'll be presenting later. And I'm just kind of going to take notes on the tension collapse thing. If there's anything, like, because it's a smaller room, if there's anything in particular you want to talk about, let me know. The idea here is, I guess I'm going to have to do this in truth, which basically means like, it's not sexy really to tell people that they're fine as they are. You think it would be, but that's not the message everyone's open to hear because they think that they should be different, you know? So I'm saying like, nah, boo, you're perfect. You got it. Where you are is great. If you can relax into where you are, I just said this, but I'll say it again. Imagine being on a basketball court and you're playing. If you are playing from the seat of your mind, what do I think is going to happen? You are constricted in such a fashion that you miss most of the court. If, however, you can be present in your body and relax and take in all information, knowing nothing, the way that you respond and interact with the court is completely different and arguably better. There is a book called The Inner Game of Tennis that I've been reading and it's fucking crazy. It's the same conclusions that I've come to in development. Like he's saying, like, you've got this self 1 and self 2, and self 1 would be your subconscious and self 2 would be the part that's like, subconscious, you should be different, everything should be different, why'd you do that, you fucked that up, you're gonna do that, blah 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 blah. Oh, it's nothing, it's just like illusions and phantoms. It's like phantom narration. And so you've got the subconscious, which is actually doing most of everything, and then you've got this like ancillary, like hassler that's like giving it a fucking hard time and taking away from its momentum forward. And it's the same, like it seems like in how we interact with the world. So you've got like yourself, and then you've got the layer of self that you think you should be, or the layer of self that you've practiced to be. And in that gap, you lose so much, like so much is lost in the system. And the only work you really need to do is to become comfortable enough to let these two things be the same. So it's like, can you relax who you think you should be to who you are? Can you relax how you think life should be to be what it is? And in that place of alignment, it's like, then you can move. I think too of like, you've got like a cart with 2 horses, a really strong, smart horse, like who knows where it needs to go, and it's like trucking. And then you've got this other horse who's like responding to every noise on the road, but he's bigger than the other one. And so in the beginning, because he's been fed more, and so like he's like trying to drive the cart all these different places, but the inner knowing, the subconscious is like, bitch, I like, be with me, like we're going, we're doing it. And this is, again, like this is a very metaphysical interpretation of action and behavior. And oops, is that what I get? But it's, oh great, I'm so glad I did this. I was having such a hard time. Like I can't sell that people need to be better than they are. And like when I started, I was like, don't worry, like I've been doing this for a long time. When I first started, I was saying like, hey, like, don't worry, we'll get you the body, we'll get you the relationship, we'll get you the job. And like, I really thought that was like the best I could do for somebody. It was like, don't worry, we'll make the outside world such that you feel good about it. But you don't feel good about the outside world. You feel good about the inside world, and then that's reflected off the outside world. And so I can't, in truth, anymore say like, hey, we'll make your life better, because it's a byproduct, but it comes from accepting your life the way that it is. And again, like, not everybody wants to hear that, especially if things are much different than they think they should be. What are things that people think should be different than they are? Their relationships. They're not with somebody, they want to be with somebody. Why? Why do you think you should be with somebody? If you really throw open those doors of things that you think you should have to have and like barrel into them, you will be surprised, but not that much. It's just shit that you like. It's all like a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense. It's like we have, going back to this like relationship idea. So let's say that that's something that's very important to you to have. Maybe you've come upon it and you're in it. Maybe you've been in it for a little, maybe you've not, I don't know. You might be so attached to this outcome, this idea of being with someone forever, that you will compromise what you really think and feel to achieve this outcome. But this outcome is not like it's not anything except all the things that added up to it. And so when you deny your truth in the moment for a later moment, there's like this, it brought it widened separation in such a fashion that you'll never find peace or happiness because you keep pushing it further and further away from where you are. It's, do you trust yourself in life enough to allow all of the pieces to come together? If I am exactly as I am, if I say things exactly as I think and feel, do I trust that I will be safe physically? Do I trust that I will be loved psychologically? And I mean, it's fucking crazy. It's like a trust fall, but that really does seem to open up all of the wisdom and all of like everything that you would ever need to get or do what you actually like, what you think you want. So if you're just joining today, this morning rather, I'm practicing talking about the habits of action material for the presentation I'll do later today on patreon.com/habitbook. And I'm trying to like, I'm working through this existential difficulty where it's like, why would you want to do something? Anyone from the crowd? So we'll break these in parts because I think it's easier if you look at, let's say, non-essential things, although everything is subject to the same treatment, but we'll say like essential things like working or following like laws. We'll put those like aside and just work on like non-essential things. So let's say a non-essential thing for you is to start to work out and exercise. Why? Why do you want to do that? If you ask and answer like 5 levels of why, you'll basically find that the truest reason, the only reason you ever really want to do anything is because you think that it will allow you to be more of yourself. How beautiful is that? You know, you just want to be more of you, and that could be more of you. By that I mean there is less of you that is filtered or cajoled to be different than it is. You are comfortable and confident to express in a way that feels truly you. You are free to be who you are. That is essentially what we expect to find at anywhere we're trying to go. What allows for us to do that is, it seems, again, an alignment of our expectations and where we are and what's happening. So by that I mean, in those later places, at those different milestones, you expect to feel good about who you are. That's the crux of all of it. Self-love, I swear, is the highest fucking teaching, because if you can come to love, and I'm not talking like self-love and like, let's get our nails done. I'm talking self-love like unconditional acceptance of self. You can sit across from you, your entire life spread out on the table, and you can say like, okay, like, I love you. You got like, okay, in that place again, the sensations, it's like, okay, so when we go back to the destination, that's what you expect to feel over here. When you've achieved this, when you have that, you expect to feel that way. If you are a strong point of consciousness, i.e., like you experience things deeply, if you are holding yourself apart from that sensation by denying what's present, it's almost fucking impossible to break out of this like force field and get over there. It's like you are stuck. So it's like, can you come to accept and love yourself exactly as you are, which would be, I feel good about me and my life, and I'm excited to live it, and I feel comfortable and confident to express wholly as myself. If you can get to that place internally here, then the world around you starts to like build to fit. And there's like, again, there's this trust component, because as you step into your voice and you say like, hey, actually, like, that's not so okay with me, or wow, like, I really would prefer to do this, you will, I'm sure, be fearful that the people that have been playing the original game with you don't want to play with you anymore, because you're not playing the same game as them. And are you comfortable and confident enough to be like, okay, well, or confident in the concept of abundance of life and love, that you are willing to let those pieces fall and say like, okay, like that was true for a season. These people were with me for this leg of the bus trip. That's this. And I trust that when I let go of this trapeze bar and I reach for the other, there's going to be one. And if there isn't, there's a net, and I'll just clamber back up. So if you're joining today, I'm practicing, or this morning rather, I'm practicing the content that I'll talk to later in the Habits of Action presentation for the patreon.com/habitbook weekly topic. I'm coming at it from like a really, like the truest place I can. So this is a little uncomfortable for me and challenging, because there is a gap, I think, in talking to the market, where it seems like there are pressing pain points. I feel fat, I feel lonely, I feel poor, I feel these things. And I'm coming at it saying like, that's perfect, that's great, let's sit in that, let's be with that. And that somehow allows for you to, it's like, if you can, let's say like, okay, so there's like, I break pain into two pieces: psyche pain, psychological pain, and physical pain. And the mind organizes itself such that it attempts to minimize your exposure to those pains by pattern recognizing off history, which you have recorded inaccurately, so that it knows you can think what thing you want to do. So let me roll that back. So basically the mind acts as like a recorder, and it's like, okay, we saw this today, that hurt, we don't want to look at that again. We said this, they responded such, don't do that. And so like these programs write about how to interact with the world. What's so fucked up is that when you really look at those programs and how they've been recorded and what they imply, you notice that you've essentially pinched yourself off from life. And it's not, I say you, but I don't mean like, don't take it like I messed myself up. Take it like, okay, like the suit that I'm wearing, I call her like I Shaylee. Like I've got my higher awareness inside, and she's dressed up as I Shaylee, and I Shaylee went through some shit, and she was really afraid and felt a lot of pain, and she organized her mind such that she makes these decisions. When you see that it's not you, it's just something you're wearing, it's a lot easier to be like, that's okay, like it's just momentum, we'll work through it. But anyhow, so the mind records all of these ideas to keep you safe. But really it's similar to like the whole fence. It's like it keeps stuff out and it keeps stuff in. And so really what you're keeping in is you. if you allowed yourself to review the things that hurt you and you recognize that actually they also caused great gifts and gains, then you can relax some of those ideas around pain avoidance. So it's like we work so hard to try not to have our heart broken, and yet when our heart is broken, we learn all this stuff. And so it's like, what a great fucking gift. And yet we step into the world again and we're like, please don't break my heart. And it's like, no, if that fucking happens, like, you win. You always win. You cannot lose. It's the only way that it occurs to you as losing is how you look at it. So we've got this mind, and it's got all of these ideas about what's right for us, and they're based on history. Another interesting thing to think about or consider is when you look at how you interpret the world, there is already so much error that you couldn't possibly record things in a way that would actually be helpful, because you can't. Your understanding is so limited. So, like, let's look at, like, so you sitting across from somebody, they're telling you that shirt is blue. If you have had an incident in the past where someone in a blue shirt cut you off driving and it was a really, like, aggressive thing, you hear that, and the way that you interpret, it's like the next thing that person says, you will interpret more with greater hostility than had they said the shirt was orange. And so you feel like you record, then let's say the next thing the person says is, we need to work on this together. And so you, already in a heightened emotional state, are like, oh, do we need to work on this together? Like, fuck you, you know? But that might not have been what they meant at all. And so then you record in your head that this person's an asshole. And the next time you interact with them, you interact with them as if they were an asshole. But you see how that conclusion is based on, like, faulty information? And that's really how our head works. It's trippy. You cannot trust what you think at all, which is really scary, because it's like, if I can't trust what I think, then what am I doing? What's the point? Like, how do I get around? And it does seem to be a function of sensation, like gut knowing. And it's really challenging to go into this in an intellectual room, because I'm essentially saying, like, thinking's a sham. But most people have had success to a point because of thinking, you see? So it's like, why, as far as I can tell, like, there's like a line, and there's probably like layers going forward, but behind the line, if you are operating in the same terrain, like the historical information, or if you're in a position or you feel lack, like, the rules that you would follow to be safe here are different than the ones you would in a world that was wide open and that you had full creative power. If you try to use your survive rules over on the thrive side, you basically sabotage yourself. And I'm pretty sure, like, everything that's on this side is just illusion, and not illusion, like, it's rooted in fear. A lot of it is fear, and fear, like, what is it? And even the idea that I'm all over the place today. This is helpful for me. I appreciate being here. I'm trying to figure out what I'm saying later. Or refine, rather. So even the idea of death, it's an idea. The idea that it should be this terrible, horrific loss is just an idea. It's based on a frame of reference. We're saying, like, it would almost be like if somebody left the room or the apartment and I threw a huge fit and I was like, oh, I'll never, like, well, I'm so, and then, like, later they come back in. I think that's kind of like with death too. It's like they exit here, you know, but we have these ideas, and the ideas are passed on, and we're standing on them quite, like, solidly, and we think, like, this is the way things are, without really questioning, like, how we came to get it. And we judge our life based on these lines, and so we find we're often, like, in lack or wrong because we're not following this script that's like, what? All right, that's not relevant at all to what it is, but okay. So let's go back to habits of action. I think the key points are that relaxation facilitates a greater understanding because more information is allowed in, and so what you need to do or you want to do becomes more obvious and therefore feels easier. So you take out, one block would be ambiguity, one block to action would be ambiguity, and so in relaxation more information is revealed and ambiguity lessens and action, likelihood to take action, increases. That would be one. What would be another block to action? Confidence. Saying like, what if I don't know how to do it? With confidence, it's tricky because the internal dialogue might not be that obvious. What you're saying inside might not be like, I just checked your confidence ratings and you're not going to feel very, like it's low for this one. It's more like a conversation around why you can't or shouldn't do that. And it might even look like blaming other people. So if you suspect that lack of confidence is a block to action, what can you do? I'd say revisit examples of how you felt that way before and let's say and survived. But I also think when we look at people who are failing around us, we can kind of admire them. So it's like, wow, you took that risk and didn't really pay out, but I see you showed up again and you tried something else and well, that worked and that's pretty cool. So there's when you are on the edge, there is a higher fail, quote unquote, probability, but it's not really failing. It just kind of sits in the mind as failing. And that's one of those phantom blocks that you don't really have to do so much work for, that you just kind of prod it a few times and say is this legit? Are you legit? And if the answer is no, then you just kind of blow it off and go forward. I think another, let's say a block, this is an interesting block, and this is kind of a derivative of the confidence one. If you have been in the same track for a while, you might not feel very confident that the next track will be better or more enjoyable than the track you're currently on. So I'm thinking a racetrack, so just a circle, you're going round and round in a circle, and you're yeah, this is the same day over and over and over, same day over and over and over. And when I was I don't know if you knew this, but I have a master's degree in accounting, and I used to do consulting in Washington, D.C. And I remember I'd get up at night to go to the bathroom, and there was this hallway I would walk. And for, I don't know, a few months, I was wow, this is this. It's all I could, every day was just kind of check. It was just that snippet. It was just it was Groundhog's Day. And that's because there's this track of I don't want to say non-living, but there's a non-aliveness to being closed off to new possibilities that feels kind of soulless and soul-sucking. When I'm talking to people in some professional jobs, they express that that's how it feels, and I think it's because their mind has closed off ideas of what's possible. So for that one, it's can you visualize, get beyond that track, start to imagine what the next track would look like. So if that thing was in motion, do you what would that feel like? What would it look like? Give yourself freedom to become confident that you would be able to really, it's there would be a vacuum of created, and it's if you're fearful that you won't be able to manage the vacuum, you might avoid doing the thing. Let's see what else. Ambiguity, confidence. So if you're joining what I'm talking about today, or this morning rather, I'm practicing narrowing the content for the habits of action presentation I'll do later, and it seems the conversation is moving such that we're talking to blocks to action forward, which aligns with what I shared yesterday in the alternative sentences. So if you haven't checked those out, it's about a 6-minute meditation, and it builds on the foundation I talked about earlier, which is like it is your true nature to be everything and anything. And so the idea that you have to do something to change you, to get something to change you, is limited. And I think for some people in some places it works, but for people that I know who are like powerhouses, it doesn't. The only way to get there is through the doorway of acceptance. And it seems counter to everything that we've been conditioned to believe as far as like productivity and contribution, but like I've been in this game for a while and this is what fucking works. I'm also not saying anything that's different than quantum physics or law of attraction or neuroscience, like biology. It all aligns with this idea that it's like if you keep saying I need to do this to be that, you are essentially saying I'm not that. And the more that you say I'm not that, the more that you believe it. The more that you believe it, the more strongly that reality takes hold. The more that you believe, more strongly that reality takes hold, the more decisions you make based off that reality. And so you build this world out around like a false idea. It's crazy. All right, blocks to action. We have ambiguity, confidence, let's say in skills, confidence in the beyond. Let's say like misaligned intentional target or action. So it's like going back to this idea of like the mind and then the self. Like, so these two pieces of you that work. The mind gets ideas about what it needs. Like, it's like, I'm 35. I'm not. How old am I? I'm 33. I'm 42. I must have X, Y, and Z. So I am going to do this. I need to get this. And so you start to organize yourself towards this target that isn't internally valuable to you. It is externally relevant. It means this. It says that. It should be like this. And so you are taking an outside idea and trying to use internal power to get there, but they're not matched because that isn't actually like valuable to you. And this is also kind of like a tricky thing to unwind, because you'll find that most of the things that you think you need to be or should are like signs of success. Like personally, I have been so deeply conditioned to think that money and success were indicative of these things. And in some respects they are, but it was like I couldn't feel peace or success unless these things were present. But in truth, I didn't even give a fuck about those things. And like, I'm so blessed. Like, whatever path I'm on is like, oh, you want to learn a lesson? Like, don't worry, next stop is that station, we'll drop you off. And so I got the experience of having all of those things, like, and it was like Freaky Friday. I woke up one day and I was like, I don't give a fuck about, I hate going out, like, let's say like fancy dinners. From one side of the line, it's like, oh, like that's what you're supposed to do if you're successful, which means you're optimizing your potential, which means you're your fullest expression. So if you're your fullest expression, it means you need to be having dinners like this. I don't like, okay, like once in a while, but like, that's not even fun to me. I want to run around in a field. But because I didn't think that running around in the field meant that I was successful, I was like withholding myself from a pleasure or joy that is truly meaningful to me to fit a script that's not mine. So we have all of these, like, this is particularly true in like relationships. It's so fucking crazy. It's like you're given this stack of scripts that you need to follow to be something, and you don't care about them. You like other things. Generally, it's like what is fun to you is probably very unique, and if you think that it should be different than it is, then you deny yourself the pleasure of that, and you force yourself into something that probably like you don't really care about. So it can be kind of an uncomfortable reorg whenever you're like, oh, guess this thing I've been trying really hard to be good at, I don't really give a fuck about, so what do I do instead? And that's an interesting conversation and takes some time. If you want to develop a practice of what do I really want, which is so helpful, I call this the mom duck concept. And it's basically like if you have something that you really want, like you get it fucking done. It's like it could have been on your to-do list for weeks, but if something shows up and you're like, okay, like I need to get it done now because I want to get it done, it's like, done. So desire to me is like the mom duck, and that means like the mom duck goes and then it pulls all the other ducks into alignment behind her. So if you can find your desire, what you would really care about or be excited about instead, it can be very powerful motivator and directional star. And I see where this would be kind of in conflict to what I was saying earlier about nothing outside, but I think there is, so it doesn't mean that you aren't moving towards things externally. It's just that you move towards them to experience them rather than to get something. So let's say like your mom duck, like you just have this, and usually they don't make sense. Like this to me is like divine inspiration, universal desire. It's like, I don't fucking know why I care about reading about penguins. Like, why would I want to study penguins? I don't know. Like, there's no outcome. It just is. It's just like the next step that's revealed. And if you can find your next step that's really exciting, and maybe it's not, 40 years away, some like cottage estate. Maybe it's really simple. Maybe like what you really want to do is like, man, I just want to study. I just want to be outside and look at the stars. Like, I just want to be a part of astronomy or some shit. If you can find what you really care about and what really feels good to you and connect to it and allow that to be okay and have your belief in that thing be okay, then it's like everything behind you, you're like, don't worry, I'll figure it out because I really want to do this. And sometimes, you can see that too with like, if somebody's in a relationship that they're not happy with and then they see an alternative, it's like they've been in this unhappy relationship for years, but they just couldn't, the next step wasn't clear, and then they meet somebody and they're like, oh, okay, like, well, now I can finally do the impossible. So again, that to me is like, that to me would be more indicative of expecting to get something somewhere else, but it could also be divinely inspired. And this is where no judgment comes in, because you can only really tell stuff by the way that it feels. What's written on the box is like just like gibberish. So blocks to action, I have ambiguity, lack of confidence and skill, lack of confidence in the beyond, misaligned, wanting, I'll say distortion, so like task dysmorphia. And that's whenever we record things in our head in a way that makes us never want to do them again. So I have a client that's brilliant neuropsychologist or neuroscientist, and when she has a paper that she's working on, or she has a course that she's teaching, when it sits on her to-do list, she is like anxious out of her mind, or she used to be, about how is she gonna get it all done, and like, oh my god, like I don't know what, like all of this, like this huge emotional mental strain experience, when really she fucking loves her job and she's really good at it, and it's just the space from the activity that makes her feel overwhelmed about it. But when she's actually doing it, it's so easy. She's just in flow. She's just like doing her thing. And so we kind of like, when there is space from the task, we sometimes distort the difficulty that we'll experience or the discomfort in such a way that we're like, oh, I'd rather not. So it's like jumping into a cold pool of water. It's like, oh, that's gonna suck. I don't want to do it. But really it doesn't. So all of these things that we're talking about, can you see where they're just kind of like inside like elbows, where it's like, hey, that thing you're thinking's wrong. And that's how we clear the path for action. This has been really helpful for me. Thanks for being around. I had no idea how I was going to drive this. Okay. Should there be more blocks? Let's see. So I think with each of those, I can like come up with a pathway like what to do in response. What are some common other blocks? Time. I think that's probably a function of priority, and that would be like clarity of desire. So Tony Robbins has a great program I listened to like 4 years ago on time management, and I think he changed the name of it, so I can't remember what it's called, but he's like the boss at explaining why desire, like how you get desire to fire you up so that you go and do it. But Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich, and all of the other fathers of like self-development, are there any chicks in that space? There is no. Just kidding. I don't know. Maybe I'm like biased towards male. I don't know. I don't know if they're women, but all the dudes, like the fathers of self-development, all basically come to the same conclusion that desire is like king. And it's true. I think I step above it and say like first self-love and then desire, because sometimes desire, until you have brought back inside your source of love and joy, you're kind of like subject to the ups and downs of you're subject kind of to the ups and downs of existence. So it's like you have and you have not, you enjoy, you grow, you this, you that. And if you are expecting your joy source to be outside, then every time the outside moves, the inside moves. So it's like, oh, everything's great, so I'm great. Everything sucks, so I suck. Like, what kind of experience is that? But if you know that you are the seat of your joy and your peace, then you know that whatever's happening outside is just to further that. And so you don't identify with it, and you can kind of like flow and enjoy seasons, which does seem to be a thing. Even if your seasons are all iterating and like, oh, I have a great fall, I have a great spring, I have a great this, I have a great that, there's still change. And if our mind is such that we don't trust in abundance, it might be painful to let one season go into another pain or go into another season. But it's only because we think that there is limit in the greatness of life. And if we think that, we experience that, and then we think that it's true. But is it? Okay, so time, priority, desire. Let's see, what are some other things? So does anyone have anything they want to talk about? I might have to do another one of these this morning, because this is a bigger topic, and I want to make sure that the material I put out for the Patreon is like concise and actionable. Was there anything today that I talked about that was like particularly helpful or new information to you? I think another thing to remember is that, let's call these like concepts. We draw lines around things in such a way that we think that they're separate. And so everything can be basically like meditation. So I have not spent a lot of time cooking, and I was tasked recently or invited to contribute to something by cutting a bunch of vegetables. My first thought was like, fuck. That's like cutting vegetables, whatever. But the way that my head's organized, it's like, well, Shaylee, is that the best way for you to contribute yourself to the world? And that is still in separation, where I would be thinking that there's something other than what I'm doing preferential to what is, but there never is. It's all the same. There is no separation. It's all you. So it's like, oh, great. Okay, overcame that thought. I'm like, all right, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to cut these. I can check out and do the motions, or I can participate in it in a way that refines my ability to, like, my hand-eye coordination. I could think about the systems of it. How do I minimize motion? So there's like all of these layers of practice inherent in everything that shows up. And if we allow it to be something for us and our refinement, it's like this conveyor belt of puzzles. And it's like, based on the last puzzle that you solved and the big puzzle you want to solve, this would be the next best puzzle for you. But we're like, this puzzle doesn't look like anything I've been expecting. Fuck this puzzle. I don't want to do it. And so then you kind of like sulk off to the side when the way out is through. And the only reason that you think you shouldn't be doing that is because you think you shouldn't be doing that. But where do you get your ideas? So I also see this, like, when I talk about strong points of consciousness, they live creatively, meaning like you're not here to do what was done before. You're here to do some fucking new shit, and you don't know what that looks like. You're putting it together as you go. And so if you are taking steps expecting to have this endpoint goal in mind, like, I'm going to grow up and be this, you're never going to get it, because you're not moving towards a predefined title. You are settling a fucking frontier. And so what it looks like and what it feels like is going to be brand new. And if you are caught up in your head, you won't be able to relax enough to do the artistic, creative manifestation work. And to me, manifestation is a stupid word, and it basically is like, I think it's pinched off to mean things that we intentionally, I manifested this cup of coffee. Well, I manifested everything. Like, there is nothing here that is not me. So I guess what I'm saying more is, like, you are bringing things across the manifest line, where it means like there's like potentiality, pure potentiality, and then there's like shit we can see in 3D. And so when you bring an idea from potentiality into the world, that's pretty fucking cool, right? Like, you're like birthing the universe. You're like birthing experience. So if you are a strong point of consciousness, you've probably felt a lot of pain, and you are gonna like bring something through that's like brand new and pretty cool. So it's just, can you relax enough to trust in the not knowingness of the step that's next? And can you allow for a state of flow to develop around your actions? And there be no separation. There is nothing preferential. The only reason, it's like nothing is good or bad, only thinking it makes it so, Shakespeare or something. And so it's like, all material I would ever contribute and have contributed, even before I knew what I was fucking doing or knew about this, is can you think about the thing differently in a way that makes it okay to do it or not do it? And it's just collapsing the mental tension away from, it should be different than it is. And it's like, it is. And I think it should be this way. And then in that, everything moves. All right. I think that's all I have today. Or this morning, rather. I'm going to sit with this and work on it a little bit more. Any feedback that you guys send would be really helpful. I'm going to keep this up for a little while. I think I've been on here for a minute. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you coming. Love you. Bye.